Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Trinity Orange County High School Football Podcast. I'm your host, Dan Albano of OCVarsity in the Orange County Register, and I'm joined by my partner, Scott Barajas, as we dive deep into Trinity and Orange County High School football. We're recording our show on Monday, September 19th, 2022. Scotty, we're coming off a lot of interesting games, including the Trinity versus USA showcase that went down over the weekend. An amazing shootout between Santa Margarita and Los Alamitos. A really good Orange County game. Edison, San Clemente was another very highly entertaining week. Big bounce back for Jay Sarah. Lots to discuss on this show. How you doing, Scotty, as we take all this in? And a lot of teams are on the bye this week, and then we're ramping up for our Trinity League football preview.
Yeah, I'm doing pretty good, Dan. It's kind of a slow week for us, and depending on who you're following, but yeah, pretty much most of the top 10 teams are kind of sitting this out, taking the bye week, getting ready for league play. But there's still some games out there that we'll be watching. So
yes, only two of the Trinity League teams are in action this week. And we'll be talking about one of those games as a game to watch. Servite going down to San Diego to take on Helix, one of the top teams in San Diego. And then St. John Bosco is also at home on Friday, once again taking on Central Catholic, from Modesto in the Central Valley. But there was a lot of great action over the weekend that we need to recap and try to give our insights about and analyze some of this stuff. So want to welcome everybody back to the show. Thank you for your support. Be sure to look for our show anywhere you get your podcast, from Apple Podcasts to Spotify. And please rate and review, share our show with your friends, your hardcore football fans. That's who Scotty and I are working for here, as we love to talk some OC and Trinity League football with you guys. So thanks for coming along the ride. Scotty, want to talk about the game I took in on Thursday. I know you watched and paid attention to it as well. But how about Los Alamitos 69, Santa Margarita 49? That's a football score, not a basketball score. One of the higher scoring games that I've seen in recent memory. It was an offensive explosion, right from the beginning, because it was a blown coverage by Los Alamitos on the very first play, and Jackson Potter threw a 70-yard touchdown, and that set the tone. And there were some prolific offensive performances, but there was no stopping, really, the Los Alamitos offense. The way one of the new things they unveiled, really, in that game, I think and it was a big part of the strategy of the game, is they played at a quicker pace. As far as the offense, as far as the no huddle and how quickly they were running plays. They hadn't shown that kind of pace. And I talked to Los Alamitos afterwards, and that was a big part of their strategy, because they feel like Santa Margarita makes a lot of adjustments and hides and disguises some of their coverage. And they wanted to take some of those adjustments and some of the strategy and the looks that Santa Margarita likes to do to offenses. They wanted to take that away, and that's what they felt, hey, we're going to go after you. We're going to play faster than we have all year. And they also hit them with, the dual attack with the great running game, over 300 yards by Damian Henderson, who looks as one of the best backs in Southern California right now. Senior, committed to Colorado State. I know we were talking off air, Scotty, about where, how impressed we are with Damian. I was very impressed with Damian Henderson. You wonder if he's going to, rise beyond Colorado State or something with his offers. And then, of course, Mekhi Lemon looked spectacular, returning a kickoff for a touchdown over, I think it was 96 yards, caught a touchdown pass on a short slant and just ran through the defense. And, Malachi Nelson was just precision work, but he's a team player, and he just works with that Los Al offense. They were balanced. Obviously Damian was running it so well, but Malachi was just very accurate and took what the defense gave. And then on the flip side, I was very impressed with with Jackson Potter threw for 480 yards, 5 touchdowns, the Santa Margarita quarterback. He looks very much improved. Now on the season, they've actually played 4 games on the field, but he has 13 touchdowns, no interceptions. And Jackson Potter really has taken that next step, and he's impressed me. And then I was very impressed with Emmett Mosley, but not surprised how well he played. He was one of 3 Eagle receivers that had over 100 yards receiving, but he had some spectacular plays, including a very long touchdown where he just threw off 3 defenders. This is the Emmett Mosley. I think if people have been listening to the Trinity League football podcast the last couple of years, especially last year where he was injured much of the year, but when he did make some brief appearances, we were always kind of talking about, hey, what's Emmett Mosley's status over at Servite? This is because of these kind of plays that we saw this kind of potential, and he's showing it this year, and he had another great game. But Santa Margarita just couldn't make enough stops for sure, and Los Al was another part of the element was that they were with Damian Henderson in their ground attack. They out-physicaled Santa Margarita. So they ran right at him at Santa Margarita, and they didn't have the D-line, the linebackers enough, though Jacob Bauer did play well. I think he had 17 tackles. But they couldn't handle the physicalness that Los Al wanted to play with Damian Henderson in that ground attack. And Santa Margarita couldn't stop it enough. That's why he ran for 300 yards. But those are a couple of my observations, I think, that are very interesting that strike me about Los Al. They're 3-2, headed to their bye week this week. Of course, no T.A. Cunningham once again. Hopefully, you guys have been following my coverage on the ineligible junior defensive tackle right now, and CIF still looking at his transfer. But what was your impressions of this game, Scotty?
Yeah, I mean, I think the last time I saw a game like this was a 2015 Centennial Bosco playoff game where it was 62-52. It was like all offense and there was no defense seemed to exist. I mean, it made for an exciting game, but it was hard to watch if you were a purist or a fan of defense, but it just showed the talent level, I think, of all the skill players to where it overwhelmed, those defensive matchups on each side. But I think the difference in this one was the fact that the Los Al offense was able to wear down Santa Margarita's defense, especially on that defensive line, because you could see Los Al had Santa Margarita on the ropes going into halftime. It was 35-30, and then Los Al just ran down the ball on Santa Margarita that whole second half and breaking off big runs by Damian Henderson. And then I think that fourth quarter, the Eagles were pretty much done. I mean, they eventually outscored them 34-19 in the second half, and it didn't help that Santa Margarita was out without Collins and Chipeapong, who, tore his meniscus, and so he's out for pretty much. I don't know if he'll even come back for the year. So they lost him, so they didn't have him. They didn't sub, and they didn't rotate its D-line very much. I think the Eagles rotated 2 guys, 1 or 2 guys. I think Tyler Parker and LeVar Talley played almost the entire game. For a while there, though, it looked like Santa Margarita was in for the rout, as they came out and caught Los Al in some misalignments and blown coverages, early on. And, then there was a lot of going on in this game. I think we probably could talk this entire podcast on it, but, you could just pretty much say that, all the star profile, high profile guys came out in this one, from Nelson, Mosley, Potter, Henderson, Lopez, and then even the freshman Manoa Fanapusa, who is starting to show what he can do, not only as a nose guard but as a short yardage back. Who he just plowed through the line for those touchdowns. And then even the Los Al offensive line, who was said to be an average group going into this season, but yet they've kind of shown to make the holes for Henderson, and that's what was been missing from the Los Al offense last year. But they'll still need to tighten up, I think, the tackling, because there was a few big plays where Emmett Mosley had some catches. He broke 3 tackles for scores on those long gains. I mean, it was a great effort by Mosley, who we said finally showed his big playability, but, he probably could have been tackled by those Los Al defenders. And then Lemon, what do you say? How do you scheme for him? They went man with help. They went zone. But Nelson was able to exploit, Santa Margarita's scheme, as you said, especially this one where Lemon lined up in the slot and Nelson threaded to them down the seam and he just exploded, there was just, it was bang, bang. And, that's tough. There's no answer for that, really.
Yeah.
And then lastly, let's say the special teams. Luckily in this one, they didn't have to come down to special teams because most special teams struggle a little bit. They need some tidying up with some missed extra points, coverages. But, what do you say? It's tough when you have those big-time guys back there. And, this one probably be, they'll probably replay this one on Wednesday night, being, as exciting as it was. So if those of you who didn't catch it could try catching it then.
Yeah. So it'll be interesting what happens with Santa Margarita. They're, I think they're 3-1. I think they picked up, one of their games is being called a forfeit victory, but that's how they head into their bye. Probably not the way they wanted to do. The injury front, especially defensively, is going to be problematic, going forward because they have a very promising offense as well. I mean, to score that many points. They have, Jackson seems so dialed in, working so well with his receivers. The Emmett Mosley, the Nico Lopez, Beyond, he looked very good too. Deep threat. I know he's another player you're high on as well.
Who was that?
Beyond his first name. Number 81.
Bain Eisman.
Bain Eisman, excuse me.
Yeah, Santa Margarita is weird because Santa Margarita, that's what something you're going to have to figure out going forward because Santa Margarita all of a sudden switched their jersey numbers. So previous they were wearing different numbers, and Eisman was wearing 9, and then he went to 81 for this game. Lopez went to 19, and he was wearing 0. So a lot of guys had some weird numbers going on. So I don't know if it was just this game or if that's something that's going to be going forward. So for those who are trying to roster, trying to print rosters or find, just keep that in mind.
Yeah, but with Bain Eisman, and Emmett Mosley, Nico Lopez, Trent Mosley as well. They have a good running back in Foye who they didn't get going too well. I know he's had mono. He's probably trying to still kind of find himself, but he has a lot of potential. That Santa Margarita offense is pretty stacked, and it can give some teams in the Trinity League some problems, especially maybe in that opener against Orange Lutheran. But their defense, Scotty, what are you going to do when you don't have maybe the defensive front to contend with some of these offenses?
It's tough. It's like you're going to have to outscore everybody. I don't know what's going to, because it's going to be interesting to see going forward when they go into Trinity League to play to see what ends up happening when you can't. You have 3 guys that you pretty much go the whole game. I mean, like I said, they rotated 2, and that's still tough. So
yeah. All right, Scotty, let's move on. This was a game we talked about last week. Jay Serra coming off a lopsided 41-0 loss to Centennial, but you saw some bright spots in the Lions' performance that day. You spotlighted them on this last week's show. I also added that Jay Serra is also healthy, and for their matchup at home the very next week against Rancho Cucamonga, I thought Jay Serra could do this. Even though Rancho Cucamonga is a very good team, they were 3-1. Got a pretty nice ranking on the CalPreps power ratings, but Jay Serra did pull it off. 34-18, beat Rancho Cucamonga second year in a row after losing to Centennial, and there they are. The Lions, finished the preseason 3-2. It could have easily been 4-1 because this is a team they were up 21-0 on the road in week 2. I think it would have been week 1 in their second game against Chaminade, and they couldn't hold on, lost on a last-second field goal. But, Scotty, you got any insight for us on Jay Serra Rancho Cucamonga?
Yeah. Remember what I told you last week? So whoever gets to 21 or 28 points wins this one. JSR eclipsed that mark. Rancho did not. But this one was never that close, except for the first possession of the game when Rancho picked JSR pass for 25 yards, picked for a pick six and jumped out 6-0. And that lead was short-lived because then the next series, JSR answered right back with Xander saying he actually looked pretty good going this series. He went 4-4, leading him down the field. And then Jamar Gabriel actually ran it in for 5 yards, and they were up 7-6. Next possession, Rancho turned the ball over as the punter snapped, bobbled the ball, couldn't get the kickoff. JSR gets the next play. George Perez punches it in for 12 yards out, 14-6 JSR. And then that's when the Lions defense kind of took over and had their way with Rancho Cucamonga, limiting them to 3 first-half first downs. So Rancho didn't get their first down until about the 6:50 mark in the second quarter. And then Lions just frustrated Boise commit quarterback TJ Tiller, who was being pressured, and he was just off throwing his receivers. And then he eventually was replaced by junior quarterback Chambers to open the second half. And it did appear that Tiller was injured in the first half. He took a shot early on in the game, and he came out for a few plays. And then, he played the rest of the half. So I don't know if that was why they pulled him, but he was 7 of 20 for 116 yards with their only rushing score. And then the third quarter went scoreless, and then the Lions decided to lean on its run game, kind of nickel and dime down the field. Interesting, because the Lions never had more than a run of 9 yards after Jeromar Gorbel's 33-yard run that opened the second half. So then they never had anything longer than that. They were pretty much patient to stay with the run game. They were 3-4-3. Eventually, Xander Zing got in for a quarterback sneak to make it 28-12 with 10 minutes left in the fourth. And then next possession, Kamal Gabriel again came on a corner blitz, and he sacked the Rancho quarterback, created a fumble. JSR recovered at the 11-yard line. Next play, Xander hits Elliott Chung for an 8-yard, 11-yard touchdown, make it 34-12. Rancho added a late score with 39 seconds to get it to the 18. But, JSR finished with 142 yards rushing from 25 carries from Perez and Gabriel and 3 touchdowns. Singh was only, he ended up being 7 of 15 passing, 72 yards, 1 touchdown, one pick. JSR had 3 sacks, 2 by Kanoa Davis, who starts on offense, but he came in on pass rush downs, and he got 2 sacks in this one. So,
yep, good bounce back effort, and yes, Scotty called it with the offensive production being important for JSR. So they also are on the bye this week, and before they open Trinity League at home on September 30th, that Friday night, at home against Mater Dei. Scotty, now before we get to the Trinity versus USA showcase games, I want to pop in real quick. Edison San Clemente, a couple of top 10 teams in Orange County hooking up down at San Clemente, and it was Edison 21, San Clemente 16. So there they are. Edison is now 5-0, and San Clemente is 4-1, so there was a battle of unbeatens. But Parker, it was typical Edison, very balanced what they've showed this year. Parker Awad was very efficient, completed 60% of his passes for about 163 yards, 2 TDs. They got good production from Carter Hogue, 21 carries, 95 yards, 1 touchdown. And then on defense they pressured Rendon. I think they had 7 sacks or so. 5 sacks. And we thought this game would be close. San Clemente, speaking of pressure, also got 3 sacks. Got 170 yards rushing from Blake Allen. No touchdown runs. Redden ran in a couple short runs, and Redden is doing okay as a junior. Quarterback, 15 of 32. Not the greatest completions percentage, but no turnovers. He's a steady game manager type guy and pretty good runner. But it came down to Edison, just a little bit more balanced, and had a big fourth quarter. This game was, San Clemente was up 9-7 at halftime, and then 2 scores for Edison in the third quarter, got the separation, and then they held on. But what do you think about this game? This Edison team, 5-0, looks to be headed toward a showdown with Los Alamitos in the Sunset League, Scotty.
Yeah, so the offenses usually get all the notoriety, but when the defensive units come up big, as Edison did numerous times in this game, you have to give it up to them. You have to give it up to the Charger defense. All of them. They were probably all the players of the game after they stopped. San Clemente on 3 consecutive second half fourth down plays, and I think that turned the tide for Edison. Because they were able to capitalize on those stops. Eventually taking that 21-9 lead heading into that fourth. The Triton defense, they also played well too. They limited Parker to 163 yards, 2 TDs, but Parker was able to make those huge throws that led to both second half TDs, which included a nice one-handed catch from Mason York that set up that Charger score, to give them the lead with 33 seconds into the third. Then San Clemente came right back, with the quarterback Redden scoring on a 5-yard run that was set up by a 66-yarder Blake Allen run. They got it down to 21-16 with 7:30, and that's how, pretty much that would end. But the last 3 minutes were nail biting for both teams and fans. As Edison couldn't run the clock out, kind of giving San Clemente life, but San Clemente's inability kind of to throw the ball consistently down the field kind of hurt them. Then they kind of got a gift from the official as Jackson Irwin sacked Redden, who noticeably fumbled the ball, and Dominic Martinez scooped it up and had a would-be score, but the refs called him down. So, San Clemente retained it. They completed a long pass to keep the drive alive at midfield. San Clemente goes 4 and out, turns the ball over on downs with 3 seconds left, and then that's ended up being the game. But, the Tritons had their opportunities, but that Edison pass rush of Jackson, Irwin, and Giles bothered Redden. He had to hurry to get the ball. It made him challenging for them to throw, and that's not really their strength. They ended up being 15 of 32 for 132 yards passing. It took them out of their element of running the ball with Allen. He still got 172 yards in his 2 scores. And then also the key play for San Clemente was Thomas Hardnoff. He took the opening kickoff down to the 10-yard line. But San Clemente had to settle for a field goal. So that was, if you talk about those 3 huge stops for Edison was huge. And then the pressure on him all night ended up being the difference. So, but that one was that atmosphere in that game, and it was just kind of nice. It was crazy. It was just what a high school, game should be. I know I'm kind of going off the handle here for a little bit, but we're talking about how they want to take the SoFi game, play the game at SoFi, the Bosco Marty. But this is, when you see the elements of high school football in packed stadiums, that is what is great, because it's loud and that venue is just. And that's what this kind of was. So
yeah, that's great to hear, Scotty. Great, good, healthy high school football right there with a lot of energy. You mentioned Dominic Lopez. Yes, he had a game high 13 tackles, and Jay Giles, Jackson Irwin. Those are a couple undersized DN guys, but they are speed guys that are trouble for tackles, and they're kind of I remember I talked to Jackson Irwin earlier in the year, and he's you almost wonder if he's going to play. I was asking him, maybe you're playing outside linebacker or something like that, but he's getting bigger and he's having success at defensive end. He's going to stay there, but it's interesting how athletic those 2 guys are.
Yeah, exactly. They've kind of it stood out because I'm like, that's why I'm intrigued with, what we're going to see down the week with Los Al, because they're going to have to get the same type of pressure and make Malik, uncomfortable and have to throw, on the run and not let him just sit back there and, but then again, they're going to have to tighten up that, those quick slants and everything from them. So that's going to be another challenge for them. But, like I said, Edison's, that scrappy group, and they just get after it.
Yeah, you mentioned the Los Al game. So that game is coming up Thursday, October 13th at Huntington Beach High School. So basically Edison also has a bye this week. And then they're going to open up a league against Huntington and then Newport back-to-back Fridays. And then they have that Thursday night game where Edison could be 7-0 taking on Los Alamitos. So like we said, Los Alamitos 3-2 right now because they have a couple losses to national teams. And the Griffins are also on their bye this week. And they open up with Newport and CDM back-to-back before they take on Edison. So there you go. Hey, Scotty, great review so far. Let's talk about the Trinity versus USA showcase over the weekend. All right, so kicking off the Trinity versus USA showcase on Friday, both these games were at St. John Bosco, but that was Mater Dei 42-14 over Milani. So the Monarchs showed some interesting new developments. One was pretty significant, was the return of touted and very talented junior junior receiver Jack Ressler. So we've been talking about the emergence of this receiving core for Mater Dei. A lot of those guys have emerged, but they've been doing it all without Jack Ressler. But he was back and contributed and became part of the offense. And then there was the blend with the powerful running game. Jordan Davison, Nate Frazier continued just with very limited touches, putting up huge numbers, including Davidson, who's a really impressive sophomore, going over 200 yards with just 10 carries. But I know you took this game in at St. John Bosco, Scotty. So this was Mater Dei improving to 5-0. They're done with their non-league season now. They're in the bye this week. What do you see from the Monarchs? Is they welcome back a new receiver, continue to ground it, and ground and pound well, and of course the defense, obviously delivered once again.
Yeah, so you look at the score, but I'd say the Monarchs kind of got off to a slow start. They didn't score until their fourth possession of the game, and they actually trailed 7-0 to Milani. And and their fourth score didn't came on Nate Frazier's first carry of the game, and he took it 53 yards for a score. But then from there, Mater Dei, they scored 42 unanswered points. And I'd still say they were, they're still a challenging 42 points. It was a night where the Mater Dei passing game probably wasn't sharp, but the run game, of Jordan Davison and Nate Frazier, took over. They combined for 333 yards. They both of them combined averaged 22 yards per carry. That also included runs of 95-yard touchdown run and a 48 touchdown run, both by Jordan Davidson. And then they also added a 50-yard screen pass from from Frazier, who took a spin, broke like several tackles, and then he showed his sprinter speed. And they basically scored all the points pretty much of the night, except for Elijah. Had 2 touchdown passes, but he was far from his usual self. He had decent numbers, and I say decent because they were probably a little bit lower because he's usually considered in the 70%. He was, was 184 yards. He was 17 of 29. And he usually, he doesn't usually miss many open receivers, and there was a couple that he missed. We mentioned Jack Ressler was back. He caught all 5 passes in the first half for something like 40 yards. It was all just short stuff to him. He didn't get anything in the open. And then he scored the last touchdown to close the half out, 21-7. Then the second half got underway, and Mater Dei ended up, they picked off a 4th down pass at the Milani pass at the 5-yard line, and that's what set up Jordan Davidson's 95-yard touchdown run as he kind of sidestepped the defender, and then he was gone. And he outraced 2 oncoming defenders And the big thing about him is that he doesn't look like he's going fast, and he just seems to split the seam on everybody. It's very deceptive, very deceiving. And then Nate Frazier scored the 51-yard screen pass, and then they got the running clock. Milani was able to score on the last play of regulation to get it to 42-14. And I'd say Milani was tough. They weren't big, but they never folded. They had a sophomore quarterback. He was very tough, and he took a beating. He took shot after shot. He was hurried. He never flinched. It was so much that Coach Rawlinson actually went and sought him out after the game, shook his hand, gave him some props and some encouraging words, because that, Monarch defense, harassed him all night long. And as they recorded 6 sacks, it's led by Nasir Wyatt, who had 2. He also had another batted ball, and he had tons of hurries. Aiden Breland added a sack. Zeus Venegas had a sack. Linebacker Abdul Sanders and Ramir Davis all added the sacks. Secondary got 3 interceptions, one from another freshman, Boogie Williams, Darius Dixon, and then Xavier Brown. And then, and here's one other interesting observation that I also thought is that Milani's corners did a solid job on Modern Day's receivers, because I think they challenged Harris, Jordan Onovo on the outside. Gavin Hunter, who's an Arizona commit, he's about a 6'2". He was on primarily Jordan the whole night. And then there was a 5'10", 170-pound Jordan Fatu, who didn't allow the big play at all. And if it was a catch, it was minimal gain. It was like, I don't think on that kid, they didn't get anything over 10 yards. So that was kind of, just an observation on that aspect of the game. But, it was an exciting game if you liked running backs. So.
Yeah, and we've talked a lot about on the show this year about the impact of Jordan Davison and Nate Frazier, but that's what I was going to ask was about. We haven't seen Ajon Bryant too much since early in the season, and wow, it shows you how important the arrival of Nate Frazier has been. He's had an unbelievable year, and so has Davidson. But what do you think about how Modern Day's ground attack is doing this all without Ajon Bryant, who I know can also be a very valuable receiver as well, but another awesome weapon to have.
Yeah, that's what's going to be interesting when he's scheduled to come back. I believe he's going to come back maybe like league or right around or a week after, but I know he's good to go from what I'm being told. So, and then it's like, where does he go now? Because the fact is that he was probably the most explosive out of these 3 guys, but these 2 other guys have been just as explosive. And if you watch Nate's explosive, and he's strong, and he breaks tackles, and just when you think he's going down, it's if you ever got a chance to see his highlight film from Pius, that's the Nate we are seeing, and we weren't sure if because you look at you look at playing other divisions, and then you play in the Trinity League, and you play in the bigger ups, and you don't know if they're gonna have that same type of dynamics, and he sure has lived up to that billing so far. Passing league, it's hard to tell, but some guys don't, some guys show up in passing league, and then when the pads come on, they disappear, or vice versa. Some guys don't do well in passing league, and when the pads come on, they're all gangbusters, and that's how he is, and he's become, very integral part in this offense, because I think he's been the big play guy, even though Jordan has scored some, this week, but Jordan's kind of the pound the rock, get the good tough yards. He'll take that 5 yards and he'll get 7 or 8 out of it. There were times where I saw him and I'm like, oh, they got 2 or 3, and it's he's got 6 out of it, but that's because of he runs the way he wiggles and glides in between, because he is actually a true running back. But when if Ajon comes back, yes, like you said, he could play in the slot. They could do a bunch of different things. There was some formations where they were both on the field, where somebody goes in motion, and then it gives you other options. Use them as you're going to throw to him, or you're going to fake to him, or you're going to throw to somebody else, so they can, easily. There are ways to get them all, together and just see where Ajon. But like I said, there are plays where we see they get 6, Ajon gets 15 or 20, just because of how quick and he is. It's just a matter of, just, stay healthy, if that's the case. Because I know he's been itching at the bit to get back. So
yeah, well, and sticking with Nate Frazier, I had a feeling that he was going to be pretty special. I liked the work he put in the springtime with track. He had a good track season, and he joined Modern Day Track and in the springtime, and he was competing right away. It seemed like to me as soon as he had transferred. So I thought, wow, this is good. This is a good sign, and he competed well in track. And then, like you said, showing that track speed and some of his dynamic playmaking. Kid seems like a pretty hard worker, and I think you also mentioned that they gave him a Gruda Goods number as well. So that obviously coaches are seeing that work ethic and kind of that next level pushing it. So that's going to be interesting once Modern Day has all these guys available. See how they develop it. Hey, Scotty, speaking of ground attacks and in good high school environments, I saw some of this game on the broadcast, but there's a pretty good presence on Saturday at St. John Bosco as the Braves played host to previously undefeated Kahuku. They were 5-0, and Braves came away with a 34-7 victory. But the visitors from Hawaii traveled well with their faithful, and then you also got Bosco running the ball well once again. Almost like what we were talking about with Modern Day, that powerful run attack. But what was your impression of this game on Saturday, Scotty?
By far this was Bosco's toughest game of the season. Kahuku's defense challenged Bosco for most of the game, even if it didn't seem like it. But they didn't allow a Bosco big score or a big play more than 17 yards. Bosco kind of used a control run game with Cam Jones, Chauncey Sylvester, and Khalil Warren. They all rushed for over 200 yards, 4 scores. Cam Jones led the way with 89 yards on 12 carries. Sylvester added 88 total yards. He had 2 receptions for 27 yards, including Sylvester's first reception on a 4th down that set up their first score. That was huge. And then on another 4th and 1, the Braves got a 17-yard run from Cam Jones. And then that next play, Bosco showed their team speed when they ran a reverse with DeAndre Moore, who he just was shot out of like a rocket for, 14 yards. No one could touch him. That was like 7:48 in the second quarter. Clarkson added a 4-yard touchdown pass to Kingston, who lined up in the full house backfield and then went out into the flat. And that was 21-0 at the half. And then Bosco opened up its, second half with another time-consuming drive capped off by a 3-yard run by Cam Jones. And then after that score, Caleb Sanchez took over for Pierce Clarkson, who finished 10 of 15 for 90 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 intercept, and 49 yards rushing. And he went out early, but Sanchez stayed and played with the next 2 series with the first team Braves, and he went and led down the last scoring drive with the Sylvester 1-yard run to make it 34-0. Bosco missed the extra point, so missed out on getting the running clock. So, but then Bosco still continued to show its stingy ways. They held the Kahuku to 38 yards rushing and 215 yards passing. But they did allow a passing touchdown late in the 4th quarter against like the mixed unit. Yeah. But the secondary guys were pretty much their starters. But, pretty much, like Mililani, Kahani, Kahuku fought, they challenged, even though, like I said, it didn't reflect in the score. I mean, this will probably be Bosco's toughest game until they see Modern Day, because next week they take on a 1-3 Modesto Central Catholic, who's lost their last 3 games since opening the season, with the 41-19 win over a Merced team. And their most recent loss was a 42-30 against Sarah, who played the same Sarah who played San Mateo, who played Modern Day last year in the state championship, and who they're 3-0, and then they also have wins over Folsom and De La Salle. That Sarah Mateo does. And then, like we said, Moscow has Servite before him, Mater Dei, and then that's what the schedule looks like.
Yeah, so it's been a, speaking of schedule, it's for the Braves, it's been a solid schedule. Maybe doesn't have the big test out there like a Centennial or a Bishop Gorman, a national ranked type team, but Allen, Bishop Ammont, Central Catholic, Cahuca, they all have one loss, all to the Braves. Allen's 3-1, Bishop Ammont's 3-1, so is Central, and Cahuca now is 5-1. They're not going to get a test this week, and then there's no bye for the Braves. After they should really roll past Central Catholic big time, and then they're going to be opening Trinity League at Cerritos College on that September 30th Friday night against Servite. And we'll see how where the Friars are at, but that should be potentially the Braves could easily be 6-0, right, going into the Mater Dei game, and Mater Dei will be 6-0. That being on October 7th at the Santa Ana Bowl.
And that's I think. Everybody's just kind of waiting and seeing. It's kind of odd because of the way the schedule kind of works out this year, because both Bosco and Mater Dei are both playing ho hum games, if you will. Mater Dei's got J. Sarah, and Bosco's got Servite. Rather than if you throw an Olu or Santa Margarita in there,
Right.
But it just didn't. Didn't work out that way, and this year, Servite's, it's not the Servite of last year. It'd be interesting if it was the Servite of last year, or the usual Servite, but that's just the way sometimes schedules fall in place.
Yeah, it's interesting too. I mean, for just speaking from the Braves, after they go to the bowl on that October 7th, then they're home. For their last three games, they close out 3 consecutive Fridays. J. Sarah, then Lutheran, or Orange Lutheran, and then Santa Margarita. So it'll be interesting how it all shakes out. It just shows you what a big game's coming up on October 7th. That's that's the game of the regular season, like it's been for the last several years. Hey, Scotty, so we got a light week. Like we said, only 2 Trinity League teams playing this week. A lot of their teams are on the bye. Maybe, but there's a couple of games I want to talk to you just real briefly as we wrap up our show here. But speaking of the Friars, they're coming off a bye week. Coach Thomas, I checked in, he said the bye week for the Friars was outstanding. They've had basically they're going to have 2 good weeks of practice. He feels like his young squad continues to get better, but they're going to be tested down against Helix, which is the number 5 team in San Diego. And Coach Thomas said that they look a year older. Last year, Servite did defeat Helix, but that was Friars maybe getting a younger type Helix team. They got more experience, and Coach Thomas says it's going to be a great opportunity for their young team to play another good, quality opponent. Helix actually had to rally last week against St. Augustine. They were down 9.5, 142-29. So they're 4-1. And this could be a pretty good game when teams coming off a bye. We'll see how much improved Servite is. But what do you think about this game, Scotty? Helix and Servite.
At first glance, when I looked at it, and you just look at Helix being 4-1, and you think, okay, Servite's, struggling.
1-3.
And I was just like, because I looked at their offense, and Servite's they've only scored 54 points in 4 games, and I think and no passing touchdowns. So it's very it's perplexing to see unless they play another game similar to La Mirada, to where it's they can get a couple of touchdowns, 21 keep it under 21 or something like that. The only other game I can really, if you really want, because you look at Helix played also Central Catholic, Cathedral Catholic, and they lost that one 14-13. But we've seen Cathedral Catholic also, they got beat pretty bad by Centennial So, it's like I think that it kind of shows you maybe where Helix is at and as strength level. So I think Servite has a shot. Has a hat. If you take to what Thomas, what you're going by what you said, that they've had that good week of practice. They maybe implemented some things, shored up some stuff. Who knows? They could be right in there. They could, because we've seen. Remember, a couple of years ago, we saw Jay Sarah. Everybody had them written off, and they came. Were struggling, and they, threw out a defensive gem, and I think either won or barely won. Some of those games. So I won't put it past the Troy Thomas team, but it's going to be very challenging. So we'll just have to follow this one and see what happens.
Yeah, it's interesting too, Scotty, kind of along your theory. Helix has got a 34.3 rating on Cal Preps. And Rancho Cucamonga, who we talked a little bit about, that beat Servite earlier this year, 27-7. They have a rating of 39.5 now. So maybe it's if Servite's improved since the early in the season, coming off a good bye week, they could be in this game. It could be competitive. It certainly would make a big difference for the Friars if they could get it, even despite their youth. But they could be 2-3 as compared to 1-4 going into the Bosco opener next week at Cerritos College. Then the Friars are going to take on Orange Lutheran Santa Margarita back to back before they get Jay Sarah. They got to close with Mater Dei. So. Some of those bigger games, I think, the Lutheran, Santa Margarita, Jay Sarah are going to be a bit more important for Servite than their rivalry games in terms of, possibly, qualifying for the playoffs and things like that. So probably the order's not too bad, I would say, for the Friars. Hey, one other game, Scotty, I want to see if you had any, take on, but I think it's a pretty good, interesting Orange County game. El Medina, San Juan Hills. So El Medina is out to a very fast start, playing really good football. They just clobbered La Habra, that's really struggling this year. But El Medina 4-0, taking on San Juan Hills. They're 0-5, and El Medina's got this sophomore quarterback Xavier Guess, who's a dazzling runner. Doesn't throw a lot, but he's pretty accurate. Has 9 touchdown passes, thrown for about 375 yards. But he's also rushed for 5 touchdowns. And El Medina is definitely a run team. They like to be physical. They got Owen Smith's a good running back. He's run for over 300 yards this season. Mason Hitchens, they bring over from defense. He's like a linebacker type. He's run for 230 yards. And that's what they really like to do. And then you got San Juan Hills that's, they're not in the South Coast League this year. They're in the Seaview League. They got some high-profile type guys like Butter Tolfason. Obviously they have one of the better sophomore linebackers. But they play a very tough schedule. They played some people close. They seem content that they're just going to play the toughest teams they can just about, and they'll take the results and try to make their way to the playoffs via league. It didn't happen last year, and we'll see if it happens this year. Even though the CV League, it seems that it's kind of a dicey thing, right, Scott? You don't get any wins in the preseason. You hope you get better. Playing good competition should make you better, but then at some point you do have to win games, and it was tough for San Juan Hills last year in the South Coast League. But can they do it in the Seaview League? Because Trabuco's not bad, and El Toro's not bad, and Aliso's improved. But El Toro and Trabuco don't look like they're going to be too easy of games for San Juan Hills, who could come into that thing winless. But does this game strike you at all, Scotty?
It's interesting for that simple fact that you look at San Juan Hills because of what happened. It's almost like you said they're almost having it's a carbon copy of last year because they did the same thing happen. They were supposed to be all have this great offense, receivers, and it just. And before you knew it, they're winless, and they're in that same. You have this quarterback who just recently they rated as I think the top sophomore quarterback at least in our area, and I think he was in the nation. I think he was like 40th. And I was like, what? That's kind of mind-boggling because of we saw him what he did against Santa Margarita, and then we saw we've seen them struggle, and so I don't know sometimes where these ratings and come from and justifying what we've seen on the field. I get it that maybe he doesn't have, he's not in the right system or what he has around him, but he does have guys around. We've seen him. They do have players that they just haven't been able to put it together. But and then having to go into play in the CB League, because you would think, like you said, if there was the same CB League last year, it would have been a different story, because now this year Churubusco and El Toro are a lot better. So, and then you look at Elmo. I think if they get past Elmo, I think they might be all right. But if they have struggle with Elmo, then I think they are going to have a hard time in the league. It's going to be very challenging. Like you said, you named off those Elmo guys, because I know when we did the 150, and I looked at them, and those guys were ballers. I mean, they played for their size. Like you said, the quarterback, the running back, all of those guys. Hitchens is a pretty big guy, but all those other guys are pretty small. They even have a nose guard that I like. His name's Sebastian. I think Chahu. I might butcher his name, Chahur, but he's about 5'11" and goes about 255, and he's pretty solid. He's very strong. Almost, I wouldn't be surprised, if Elmo, takes this one, but hopefully it's, San Juan Hills can get up a win on the column before they hit the league play. But
yeah, El Medina also has Washington commit tackle,
that's
Elisha Jacket, who's a physical guy and athletic for his size as well. But yeah, it's interesting, Scotty, for San Juan Hills, because, like I said, they're 0-5. They dropped this, they're 0-6, and then they hit the road to Tesoro, a crossover game to close out non-league, and then they get into the Seaview League, and they open they play at El Toro, at Churubusco back to back. So it'll be interesting, Scotty, what's going on with San Juan Hills. And Elmo's interesting too. For some OC football fans, they're in the North Hills League this year, which is looking pretty interesting, Scotty. Now, some of the competition isn't quite there yet. Like El Dorado I think is pretty good. I've seen them in person. They're 4-0. They play physical. They got running backs. They have a good line, and they fly around pretty well on defense. But they haven't played anybody of note really at all. It's very hard to tell how good they are. I thought they were going to show. I thought the Fountain Valley game would be they'd get some kind of test, and they rolled 50-7. But they're not playing any very strong schedule. Canyon is putting up some huge numbers as well in the North Hills League. They haven't really played anybody too strong, solid teams, but we're not talking about a lot of top 25s. But those games are coming for both of those teams. And then you got El Medina. That's a pretty good trio of teams that I don't know how. I think OC football's got to respect these guys and follow them and see how El Dorado, Canyon, and El Medina do this year.
Yeah, some of those guys I saw, like I said, during passing tournaments, and some of them fared pretty well. I know the kid over at Canyon that's going for all those yards, but it's you can take it with a grain of salt, because it's like yeah, they did great in passing league, then they're doing it on the field, but it's like, who have they played? Because I had a buddy of mine who scouts just as much as I do, and he went and saw that play against Esperanza, and he said it was just really hard to gauge. I mean, it was like the kid, could throw there, but it's like if you take him, take them, and you put them in some better competition, what do those numbers turn out to be? So I don't know, and it's kind of hard when you don't get a gauge, and that's what kind of makes this part of the of our job, I guess, difficult. but it's fun nonetheless. So
yeah, fun and challenging. Lunsberg is the quarterback at Canyon. Yeah, he's got 23 touchdowns already, and that's just in four games. And Canyon this week plays Brea Elena. Well, Scotty, our next show, and all our listeners, we're going to have a pretty special show next week. We're going to have our in-depth preview of the Trinity League. All 6 teams will have an in-depth breakdown, strength, weaknesses. So be sure to come back as we start to narrow it in here on the Trinity League. And we'll have previews of the first round of the Trinity. And we're going to continue to talk a little bit OC football like we did with, if there's a big San Clemente Mission game and the Los Al, Edison game and some other things that strike us. But we are going to get a little bit more laser focus on the Trinity in-depth preview coming up next week. So, Scotty, I'm excited to get into that with you. How do you feeling about getting ready for our Trinity preview?
No, man, I've already been working on it, Dan. So it's like I thought we were ready to go this week, and then I forgot. I'm like, oh, it's next week. But yeah, so I'll have some good insights, some scoops, some lineups, tidbits. So yeah, for all of you guys who like the details. So
yes, sir. We got count me in, Scotty. So I'm ready for that talk next week as well, and looking to bring some stuff to match with you as well. So, well, look forward to it next week, Scotty. And for Scott Barajas, I'm Dan Albano, and thanks for joining us on the Trinity Orange County Football Podcast.